in my work with executives, I'm just continually amazed how much people are willing to suffer to get ahead. But when it comes to self-improvement, they can't tolerate it.
Welcome to the Let Me Save You 25 Years podcast. I am your host, Shawn David Nelson, sometimes known as that love sack guy. Listen, I struggle every day with this concept. In my mind, this is like the root of it all. And we are talking to the guru of this entire realm of wisdom and energy and knowledge and self-discovery. Okay. Today's topic, listen, it's not complicated, but it is hard. When I was about 21 years old, just getting the business going, working my way through college, I thankfully stumbled across this book called Emotional Intelligence. It was pretty new at the time. It was written by an author called Daniel Goleman, and it kicked off an entire, new word in pop psychology, in personal development. And today that word's thrown around all the time. I think we've all heard it. We've talked to our kids about it, this idea of emotional intelligence, but it didn't always exist. Today's author, Dr. Travis Bradberry, wrote the follow-up. Emotional Intelligence 2.0 took the concept even further in the mid-2000s and has now written a more recent book, The New Emotional Intelligence, that just gives you dozens and dozens of strategies to understand what it is in the first place, rooted in self-awareness, ending in social awareness. And this is the man. This is the guy who knows the most about a topic that is near and dear to my heart. Okay. In this discussion, we're going to get talking about self-improvement, the idea that, listen, there's no finish line. You look at people that you hold up on a pedestal as being so good at what they do, so put together. And I promise you, they are struggling with all of the same things we're going to discuss in today's podcast. It's a journey of constant growth for all of us. There are some aspects of ourselves that we can't change, by the way. This is not one of those. This is a part of your brain, as this Dr. Bradberry will tell you, that is plastic, that can be adapted and changed. And that's why, reading works like his book, This New Emotional Intelligence, can change your brain. And when you put these strategies to work, when you're willing to do the work, he's going to share how we are neurologically wired to have an emotional experience as human beings. This is how we've evolved. And there's a reason for it. There's a reason we've evolved this way. And by the way, I think it's going to make us more valuable in the age of AI, not less valuable. It sounds simple, but you got to really think about this. Emotions are the primary driver of our behavior. And our thinking about, strategizing about how to approach things better, that's the slower mechanism. Often the more preferable, but it requires the kind of effort we're talking about as we unpack this idea of it being, not complicated, but it is hard. You got to listen to the wisdom of the people who have been there before you. Another great piece of advice you're going to get from this amazing conversation with the world's foremost expert on what I think is the most fundamental topic if you want to have any success in life. Here you go. Today's guest is one of the world's leading authorities on emotional intelligence, someone who has helped millions of people unlock the skills that separate average results from extraordinary ones. He's the co-founder of Talent Smart, the #1 best-selling author of Emotional Intelligence 2.0, and his brand new book, The New Emotional Intelligence, takes his work even further by giving us fresh insights for thriving in today's fast changing world. Today, we're diving into a powerful Shawnism. It's not complicated, but it is hard. Because while the answers and strategies for getting the outcomes that we want might be simple, actually doing the work to achieve them is the real challenge. Please welcome to the pod, Dr. Travis Bradberry.
Thanks so much for having me.
Heck yeah. Well, you know how I feel about this topic. To me, this is like ground zero. This is the epicenter. So I'm excited to dive into it with you. But before we go there, without thinking too hard, when you heard today's Shawnism, it's not complicated, but it's hard. What was the first thing that came to mind for you?
My whole career. I built my brand around that. People are, that's kind of the reaction I get to my books. They say, well, this is kind of common sense, right? And, well, common sense isn't all that common, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that are very uncomplicated and very, very difficult to execute. And emotional intelligence it hinges on that. It sits right there. So you can't get anywhere unless you can do some hard things that are very uncomplicated.
Yeah. Sadly, I feel like I'm reminded of this like every day, like every interaction, and I don't know, maybe I'm just hyper sensitive to it because like you've noticed, I've even called it out in my own book, how formative the original work, Emotional Intelligence, Daniel Goleman, was in my life, and everything that, branched from that, including your book, and not just your book, the Emotional Intelligence survey that you've executed millions of. And look, it's a topic that I've trafficked in for now almost 3 decades. And as recently as yesterday, in my interaction with my teenage daughter, am I disappointing myself in how I show up in subtle ways or big ways? And so it's not complicated, but it is super hard. And I'm not sure if there's ever even I don't even know how I can think of like an end to this journey. I'm worried I'm going to go to my grave still totally deficient in my ability to manage myself. But what do you say to people like that, like who maybe feel like I do, that after all this work that's been done, after all my focus on it, I still find myself so deficient? How do you feel about that as a practitioner?
There is no finish line. That's what it comes down to for me. There is no finish line. And if you are actively working on your EQ, if you're making it a priority, then you're constantly bumping into things that you can do differently. In my work with executives, I'm just continually amazed how much people are willing to suffer to get ahead. But when it comes to self-improvement, they can't tolerate it. So if you can tolerate it, you're going to see there is no finish line, right? You're always deficient in something, but those things that you expose yourself to mentally, you realize that you should be doing differently, that you acknowledge, allow you to make progress and do things better. They also show you where you should be, and you don't always get quite there, but that's okay. That is the process. I've had people ask me, for some reason, I never present. I'm a teacher. I teach emotional intelligence. I don't present as a guru. I don't talk about myself. And when people ask me about myself, at times I've had people kind of surprised that I don't say I'm some emotional intelligence savant. And why should I be? I'm working on it like everybody else. I know some things. I've learned a lot, but I'm on my journey just like everyone else.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you get to work with all kinds of successful people, executives, teams of people. You've how do I put it? You've facilitated millions of self-development surveys, emotional intelligence surveys that have brick by brick helped you build the frameworks that make up your latest book, The New Emotional Intelligence, which I'm halfway through and really loving. And I love, of course, the way you make it so practical, pragmatic, executable, right? If you're not familiar with Travis's books and the way he approaches things, he just gives you the worksheet. It makes it very doable for anybody. But with all that out there, Travis, and the tools you've created, what do you think it is that makes it so hard? You have successful people, like you said, who would, you know, beg, borrow, steal, claw their way to the top, but somehow have sometimes reveal that it can be very difficult for them to work on themselves. Why is that? Why do you think that's hard for people to do?
The reason it's hard is there are some aspects of ourselves that we can't change. And that's something that we learn growing up. So people make that assumption about emotional intelligence. So let's take regular intelligence, or IQ. IQ is not what you know, it's the pace at which you assimilate new information. That's how IQ is measured. And it's measured relative to your peers. And they've done longitudinal studies where they follow people from age 5 to age 50, and their IQ does not change. It does not change. So if I'm going to look at my deficits in IQ, that's going to be pretty discouraging. EQ doesn't work that way. You can improve. The brain pathway that's responsible for emotional intelligence is what neurologists call plastic. It's highly plastic, which means it's malleable and it's adaptive to change. So everything that you recognize that you could be doing differently, that you could be doing better, when you actively do the work to do it better, you change your brain and you improve. So people don't realize that that's the case. And that's why they put the blinders on, because, I love sports. I am not great at sports. I am not a special athlete in any way, shape, or form. That doesn't stop me from going out there, but I don't sit there and wallow in the fact that I can't change my physiology. Like when I take my 23andMe and it says you do not have the muscle fiber, a quick twitch muscle fiber associated with elite athletes. It's like, well, no kidding. I'm pretty sure I don't. But
That's
sitting
funny.
there and fixating on that doesn't take you anywhere. With EQ, it's the opposite. Your deficits are something that you can turn into strengths.
Wow. And um, for those that, so you and I traffic in this language. You as a professional, me as a tourist. But like I said, even it meant enough to me to mention it in my own book, as you pointed out, right? Like just this whole realm of emotional intelligence and self-awareness. And I think, as I've described, I've answered that question. Secret to success: self-awareness is at the root for a long time. So this is a area that you and I traffic in. For those just tuning in, as it were, um, break it down. Again, it's not complicated, but it is hard. Break it down in the way that only you can, into its key building blocks for anyone tuning in. What is emotional intelligence, and why does it matter so much?
Well, emotional intelligence is pretty simple in the sense that it's your awareness of emotions in yourself and other people, and what you do with that awareness, how you use it to guide your behavior and get the results that you want in life. Uh, there's 4 skills. The first 2 are self-awareness and self-management. So that's awareness of your own emotions, both in the moment and also your tendencies, right? The situations and people that push your buttons, the situations and people where you thrive. If you really understand yourself, you understand those tendencies, and then how you manage that, how you respond to it. We have more than 400 emotional experiences every single day. You cannot turn them off. So your awareness allows you to manage and push yourself in a new direction to get results. On the social side of things, you have 2 more skills. You have social awareness and relationship management. Social awareness is awareness of not just the emotional state of other people, although that's certainly an important factor, but also just how they see the world, what the world looks like through their eyes, what they're going through, what they may be seeing that are having trouble communicating to you. And then relationship management is how you use those first 3 skills in concert. So I'm trying to improve the overall quality of my relationships by using my self-awareness and what's going on with me, and my social awareness and what's going on with the other person, and then I'm going to self-manage, right? I'm going to alter my behavior in response to that to reach a better outcome. So that's relationship management, and it's sort of the capstone, if you will, of emotional intelligence, because it involves the three other skills.
That's awesome. I mean, there you go. Four basic, pretty straightforward ideas. Each one of them can have all the complexity you want to build into them, but we don't need to add a lot of complexity, right? Knowing yourself, managing yourself, understanding others around you, and then managing those relationships. There you go. That's what has made Travis, I think, so successful as an author, as the leader of this movement. And the part that, as I was again listening to your latest book, because obviously it covers a lot of ground that's already been covered, but builds on it further. The part that flashed to me immediately, and I know you get here toward the end of your work as well. If, because why does it matter? So for anyone listening, so what? A bunch of like psychobabble. We're all trying to get better. Sure, that's like an easy thing to rally around, but look, if it is true, as many different scientific studies have proven, or sociological studies have proven, that true happiness, true joy is most directly correlated with the quality of our relationships, then I think what you just said matters a lot, because you gave us a pretty straightforward pathway to achieving better relationships, right?
Yes, and the outcomes that you want in life, right? And relationships are a huge one. Uh, Being able to manage your own behavior. I mean, we all struggle with self control. That's a fundamental issue of our existence, and so the outcomes are really important, and I think they provide a great argument. The other argument I think that's really relevant is just how your brain is wired. Um, our brains are wired to make emotions the primary driver of our behavior. Everything you experience travels through your limbic system first, and it ensures you have an emotional reaction to what you're experiencing before you're able to think rationally about it.
Hold on. That is such a huge concept that I just want to make sure everyone grabs, right? We are wired to have an emotional experience first. Explain why that is.
Well, if you when you experience something, it travels to the base of your brain and it runs across your brain. Your limbic system is located in the midbrain. The limbic system generates emotions. So your brain is built to have emotions drive behavior. You get the emotion, you're motivated to act. But your rational thought about what you're feeling happens up here behind your forehead in your prefrontal cortex. So you have the knee jerk emotional reaction, then you're able to rationally process and think about what you're feeling. So, emotional intelligence is the pathway between the rational and emotional centers of your brain. It's how much information flows back and forth. And if you don't master that, if you don't think about your emotions, then they just take the wheel and they drive the bus.
But hold on, let's go back to the mechanics, because this is what I'm fascinated with. Explain to people why that's the case, why we're wired that way as humans. And because I think that it's easy, business, I don't know, competition, technology can obviously point out the flaws in human nature. And it's often, I think, easy for people to tie it back to, well, we're emotional beings. And, robots, they don't have this, they'll have no problem making the most efficient choice because they're not emotional beings, right? They're cold, hard, calculating. Why is it scientifically we have to be wired that way, first of all? And then I think let's keep going where you're going.
I mean, I think the brain is wired that way because there's an evolutionary benefit.
Right.
So, 200,000 years ago, if you're a caveman, cave dweller, and a saber-toothed tiger jumps out from behind a bush, you want to have a very quick knee-jerk emotional reaction. That ensures your survival. But as the brain has evolved, it's the higher order thinking is the part that evolved. The base of the brain, the midbrain, are largely unchanged. But the higher level thought, the more reflective, slow processing type thinking is something that evolved over time. And it's kind of at odds at times in modern living because we have these knee jerk reactions in situations that they don't help you. For example, if you're a team leader and you're in a meeting and someone says something that you think is stupid, if you respond in kind with your knee jerk reaction and let them know that, it may not help build the kind of culture you're trying to build in a team.
Right.
So you want to be adept at understanding these knee jerk reactions before they turn into behavior.
Yeah. One of my favorite metaphors used that pops up in a number of different pop writings is the elephant and the rider, right? You have this this limbic system that is the elephant. And like any elephant, it has plenty of power to charge through anything, even react quickly, and can be difficult to control. But you do have a rider, and that rider can influence and even to some degree overpower and direct the elephant most of the time,
Yeah.
but maybe not in every moment. And so I love that metaphor. I think that's fantastic, and I love just getting down to that basic physiological explanation for all of us, so that we understand that we as humans, it really is an evolutionary strength to have this fast reaction emotional layer that allows us to do all kinds of things. In fact, it's one of the things that has me thinking about AI and robots and, you know, what will the human advantage be? Because there may be one, unless they're able to think of a way to match that emotional response that does have value. But on the other hand, run amok, that emotional response, as you just described, can get us in a lot of trouble and is frankly responsible for much of the complicated nature of our relationships and human existence. So our ability to manage those things is really what your book unpacks so well. And I love that it's rooted. I love that the first of these four simple blocks that you outline is self-awareness, because I've always said, that's the root. That is the core upon which I think all of our success can be built. And without it, with a lack of self-awareness, unless you're extremely lucky, and that can come in a lot of forms, right? You're born into it, you're placed into it, you fall into it, whatever it may be. You're going to have a very hard time with continued success if it's not built on self-awareness. And so, look, your format makes it not complicated, uh, but it is hard for all the reasons that we just described. We're fighting our evolved physiology, and we're ricocheting off of a billion other humans that are just as emotional and flawed, developed or underdeveloped as we may be.
Yeah. And there's times where you can turn the rational thought off. I mean, I'm sure I know you've done a lot of surfing, and that's an example of, in those moments, I'm not doing a lot of processing of my emotions. I'm just reacting to my environment. If my dog runs off the leash and I'm chasing him down, it's that type of thing. But that's not the bulk of our interactions every day, especially person to person when you're having a conversation. It requires some thought. You don't want the elephant running amok.
That's awesome. Well, like all issues, right? Step number one is recognition. So I think that's why I wanted to just dwell on the physiology of it for everyone listening. I'm so fascinated by it. I think that for all these reasons, and it's all happening inside of us. Like, isn't it amazing that all of this action that we're describing and even the science of it is inside of each one of us. We all get to experience this in our own ways. We get to observe it. We get to accept what Travis is dishing up is either accurate or not accurate based on our lived experience. But scientifically, of course, there's plenty of proof and evidence of all that. And so, what pushback do you ever get? Before we get it, I want to come back to your framework and get into some of that nitty gritty. But I'm curious, does this science, or at least this, like beyond the science, because you have the hard science, the physiology, the neural pathways, all of that, but then you have the practice of let's call it emotional intelligence, put into practice. Is there any controversy in any of this? Are there any legitimate challengers to any of this? Or is at this point, is it just kind of widely accepted? And like, what do you run into? Cause as a, beyond just a coach and an author, you're out there, you know, on the forefront of this movement. I'm curious if there's any kind of challenge to it.
Yeah, I don't I don't see any legitimate controversy around this idea that emotions are the primary driver of the behavior, and there's communication between your rational brain and your limbic system, and that can greatly change the outcome of how you think or how you react. The big debate, to me, is a really boring and academic one, and it's whether emotional intelligence truly qualifies as a separate intelligence. You see, for me, emotional intelligence is vernacular. So whether or not PhDs in academia, if it qualifies to be called an intelligence, I don't know. It doesn't change the fact that we have something to talk about here that's really important. And my favorite thing about that, so I have a dual PhD in clinical and industrial psychology. And industrial psychology is the study of psychology in a business setting. And they have a big the Society for Industrial Psychology has a big conference every year, and all the academics get together. And for a while, it was a real hot debate. I don't know, it was about 10 or 15 years ago, whether or not emotional intelligence was a separate intelligence. And they would go on there, and
Interesting.
one year people were dropping F bombs. It was wild. It just turned into this very unemotionally intelligent conversation.
Awesome.
And to me, it just proved my point where who cares if it's a separate intelligence? Is
Right.
this a skill set that we need? You guys are literally demonstrating that this is a skill set that we need.
Did
And
anyone get to point that out in the moment as that was going down?
not that I saw.
Oh
It was
man, what a
just,
missed opportunity.
no. Yeah, I should have raised my hand. Everybody was really twisted up. I wasn't even on the panel because honestly, I don't. That debate is meaningless to me. Yeah, I'm here to help people apply and use this stuff in the real world. Yeah, academia sometimes is a little out of touch, in my opinion.
Oh man, I love that. So before we move on, I also have to ask, as a student of this myself, what's your take on Carl Jung? The 16 personality archetypes, all of this. How does this relate back, if it does at all? And how do you view that realm of, I don't know, thinking and discovery as it relates to any of this?
Well, I think personality is really important to understand. Personality is a bit like IQ in that it doesn't change, right? They've done longitudinal studies. It's an aspect of your self that really personality is like this. It's where you're comfortable. Some people are just, for example, a personality characteristic is extroversion, and they're a
Yeah.
lot more comfortable in the presence of other people. They derive energy from it. It doesn't sap their energy. A lot of these characteristics are very hard to change because they are located in brain regions that aren't particularly malleable, like the emotional intelligence region. So when you want to work on your EQ, it's also really important to know your personality and know what some of these tendencies are that you have. Uh, the way I say it is your personality is the vessel through which your emotional intelligence is expressed, because a highly extroverted person might work on the emotional intelligence skill of relationship management differently than a highly introverted person. So there is some connection between those two areas, and I think whether if you're taking a five-factor personality test or a Myers-Briggs, or you like the Strengths Finder, which they don't call it a personality test, but I think it is. It's largely measuring strengths that are hard to change. All that stuff can be useful, and there are connections to your emotional intelligence that you can make.
I love that. Yeah. So for anyone listening, I had the weird opportunity to become a certified Myers-Briggs type indicator administrator in Shanghai, China, of all places. And I got to deliver these courses to Fortune 500 companies when I was in my early 20s in Mandarin Chinese, and then debrief all of these interesting courses with people, with business leaders in China. And it was just a fascinating period of my life. It's where I went deeper into this whole realm of the physiology of our brains, the way we're wired, these personalities that these personality profiles that Dr. Travis here is kind of touching on. And I'll just say, for those who find any of this stuff interesting, psychology, um, emotional intelligence, uh, personal development, that realm of study, in particular, Carl Jung, because I like to go to original sources, and I feel like for me, Jung is, I think the foundation of a lot of that work, and I just find it fascinating even to this day, and I continue to reflect daily on some of the key learnings that I took away from that experience. Some of even like the thing I also love about that realm, and the reason I'm poking at this is on the surface, a lot of people, even my own wife, hates the whole personality thing because they don't like being put in a box. They don't like being told who they are. I find it fascinating that you just called out that those parts of the brain are less malleable than some other parts, right? So we're kind of stuck with how the mold we come out with, and I kind of believe that. I definitely subscribe to that. I like that idea. I like learning that. But the part that sticks with me is when I got deeper into learning about the different layers and the intricacies of the way that these 16 personality profiles, really the four core, at least according to Jung, and others think there's more and there's different frameworks, but the four core metrics on which this is all based overlap with each other. That's where it starts to get really fascinating, because there's also things, for instance, discussion around the dark side of these different personalities and how they are expressed under extreme stress and pressure and things like that. And as you learn this, and as I got to see in my own life, people like my own father, people like myself, of course, other people around me, and I got to understand their personalities and observe them through this lens. I feel like it is crazy accurate. I feel like it is uncannily useful and accurate, and it can really help a person navigate. So tying this all together for me, and perhaps I just have a natural fascination for all the things psychological and in this realm, but I just really advocate learning more on these topics, going deeper. And that's the amazing thing is, even though today's topic, right, it's not complicated, but it's hard, which I do believe. It also is complicated in the sense that these things run deep, right? It's wired in our minds, it's wired in our bodies, it's hardwired across billions of people, and then you have the interactions, right, to unpack as well, and the complexities within those. And so, um, anyway, look, for anyone listening, I'm just trying to give you a taste of all of the cool stuff that's, if you're not as deeply interested or versed in this topic, I think it's worth getting into. I think it's useful to all of us because we all are experiencing the world through our own minds, and understanding it deeply has been both fascinating and useful to me. And lastly, I just have to ask, or I have to tie it back to the reason I think Dr. Bradberry's work is so useful is because he makes it simple, and I think that there is great value in taking stuff that has a certain degree of complexity and being able to break it down to these four. That's what I love about your work in particular, these four simple building blocks. So now, as you've gone out in the world and put this to work, and you're doing that now with the rollout of this new book, what is new about this draft of emotional intelligence versus what came before?
Well, I wrote a book in 2009 that has sold a lot of copies. Was and is really popular. Uh, it's not 2009 anymore, not even close. So having a book that's successful for that long is an enviable position to be in as an author. The trouble is your thinking in the book can become a bit outdated.
Hmm.
And
Can you give us an example or two?
um, well, for example, the new book has a new test, which I think is much better than the test in the original book.
Okay.
And for a long time, I had my hands tied with that test because millions of people were using it. They were my customers and they didn't want me to change it. Well, I sold that business in 2019 and I had a 5-year non-compete, which recently expired. So I could do whatever I wanted. Well, I have a lot of, sitting on a lot of ideas to make
Hmm.
it better. and it gave me an opportunity to do that. Um, there's a great deal of new research in psychology and neuroscience that I just really wanted to bring to readers and make them aware of this. So that doesn't necessarily refute anything in the old book, but it adds a lot. I feel like I'm depriving people of that by selling them a 15-year-old book. And then it's the strategies. I've learned a lot in 15 years. I was 33 when that book came out. I have more life experience. I have more professional experience, and that's captured in the 60 new strategies in the new book. I think they're just more powerful. They take people farther. I've just sort of iterated and refined my approach over the years, and that's what I'm trying to capture in the new emotional intelligence. And that's why I got that title. It is new. It's kind of what you need to be looking at today.
I love that. And do you feel also that, as I hear you say this, um, besides the new research and besides your new lived experiences, which of course are priceless and valuable, uh, is the context of, let's say, 2025, any different? Does that come into play in any of this, or do you think that um, context is always shifting, and so we'll call that a constant somehow?
No, I think it matters, right? I mean, we just keep pushing further and further into the digital age. More and more communication happens virtually, remotely, um, and our brains are wired for face-to-face communication, and
Mm,
that's it's going to take eons for the brain to change and catch up for that. So there are strategies in the book, quite a few, that focus on that to help people to be better at that and understand. Especially if I think that people our age that had conversations offline 25 years ago, it's a little easier to do that. We probably have more of a tendency to do that than someone that's fresh entering the workforce, because their whole life has been digital. But that's some of the things I'm trying to teach people: when to take a conversation offline,
mm,
understanding how a message is received digitally, understanding the biases that exist when we communicate virtually and we don't have a person reacting in front of us, and how that can lead us to be more um, mean and destructive as opposed to constructive. So yeah, teaching people some of the finer points there.
that's amazing. And you feel that the book itself, besides your consulting practice, the book itself covers a lot of this ground and gives people a lot of these actionable strategies that are useful in our context today.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big part of it. So it's learning the latest and greatest with the research, having a test that's more accurate and better constructed, harder to fake good. It is a self-assessment, so people have this tendency to try to inflate their scores and make themselves look better,
Mm,
which doesn't help you with your EQ,
right.
because the test, there's 60 strategies in the book, and your score profile gets analyzed, and it tells you which are the 3 strategies you should start with, where you're going to get the most. So if you don't answer honestly, then you're going to have a hard time with that. And
Right.
this new test is very, very good at that. And then yeah, strategies that are a little more tailored to 2025 and the kind of challenges people are facing today.
I love that. So, look, to provide a little bit of value to those listening, let's circle back. We have these 4 building blocks. You outlined them great. Your book does it well, just in the right from the outset. Um, let's take out a few high points. Get the spirit of today's conversation. It's not complicated, but it's hard. We established why it's hard, right? There are certain things people have been pre-wired to believe they can't change. This is an area they can. So let pick out, yeah, what are a couple of common themes, practical pieces of practical advice that you see recurring over and over again now as you consult people on this topic. Ways, maybe hacks, whatever strategies that stand out to you that can make it a little easier for people to develop more of this emotional intelligence that we all should aspire to.
Yeah, in the interest of this theme, it's 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 not hard, or it is hard,
Yeah.
but it's not hard to understand. Um, More than 10 million people have taken my emotional intelligence test. And something I see time and time again in people's score profiles is they are constantly winning the battle to lose the war in their relationships. So
Hmm.
it's a momentary victory, could be proving that you're right, getting some kind of satisfaction out of an interaction that is actually eroding the overall quality of your relationship.
Wow.
So, one of the strategies in the book is lose the battle to win the war. And that's learning when it's the right time to stand your ground and fight, and when is the right time to let go, and being a good read on that. That's something that a lot of people struggle with. And a lot of the strategies from the book kind of work that way. It's based on this knowledge that I've gained giving all these assessments, and trying to pinpoint what people struggle with and what we all need to be working on.
That's such a good one. I love that. I feel like, I struggle with that. I feel like, uh, my wife is better at that than I am, and it's something that I reflect on a lot. I also think, how do you think about self-deprecation? Humor, as it pertains to that kind of realm of relationship management.
I think that it's a tool that can be used effectively. Um, Self-deprecation can be used to show humility. Um, it can also kind of go haywire and be sort of a negative. It can feed negative thinking. It can come from
Hmm.
negative thinking, and they can feed it and get that cycle going, which
Yeah.
is more of an internal struggle. But I think in terms of a relationship, when it lands well, people like it, and it's good for the relationship. When they feel like you're in kind of a negative spiral, it can affect others negatively.
Yeah. I feel like that's an example where, and I don't know where she learned it, but my wife's really good at that. And I'm not talking about with me even as much as like as I watch her with others, making people feel great about themselves. It's something that, this is part of my own, I talk about this a lot on my podcast, but my own morning mantra, right? Like I remind myself to make people feel great about themselves and even deprecate myself. Cause I'm in a position where sometimes, look, I'm a CEO of a public company. I have a bunch of employees. Whatever. I'm sometimes positioned as like a person who's had some success or whatever. And and so I try to actively be thinking about how to do that. Because if I don't, of course, even if I'm not, even if I'm maybe well behaved, I think it's easy for people to generate these preconceived notions of me because of let's say that position or title or authority or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even if I'm maybe not even actively, and that's an example of me trying to, one, be self-aware, and two, manage myself. And I only offer that to people listening just as a clumsy example of me trying to put this stuff into practice. It's real. Give me another one. That was such a good one. Give me another great common strategy.
Sure. Another one that I think falls along these lines, which is it's not complicated, but it's hard to do, is a self awareness strategy that I call "You Spot It, You Got It."
Okay.
And the idea here is that people do things all day long that are annoying and could potentially get our goat. Yet there's only certain things that people do that drive us absolutely crazy. And
Mm-hmm.
that's because they reveal something about ourselves that we're struggling with. So it could be something you're aware of. Perhaps you struggle with confidence, and so you're interacting with someone who's struggling with confidence, and it makes your skin crawl. It could be something you're not aware of, and their actions bring it to your awareness. It's sort of a subconscious kind of reminder. So, you know, teaching people to increase their self awareness is a task of teaching people to look at themselves differently and
Hmm.
take a different lens, right? And so the assessment is part of that. It gives you an objective picture of your behavior, but there's also techniques you can use, such as "You Spot It, You Got It," to think about interactions a little differently, and see what you can glean from them.
That's so good. This is so good. I love it. And um, And I have to ask, sorry, non sequitur, but this has been on my mind. I mentioned it earlier in the conversation. As you see, so okay, let me back up. One of the phenomenon that stuck with me from back in my days of learning the MBTI, again, the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, based on Jungian personality profiling archetypes, was this idea that certain personalities found themselves gravitating obviously towards certain careers and having success in certain realms. It seems like an obvious conclusion, and it's true by the numbers. My personality type using the MBTI ENFP is the most common, at least it was at the time, for founders and entrepreneurs, right? And there's lots of reasons for that, whatever. And ironically, it's polar opposite, as it were, on the chart. INTJ is found in CEOs and administrators of business. So I'm both, in the sense, like, now I find myself the CEO of a public company that I happen to found. But INTJs have the most success in corporate America by the numbers, because corporate America will at least shape you into being more INTJ if you subject yourself to it. What's my point? Um, my As I think about how INTJ, more cold, more rational, more logical than feeling. To be successful in corporate America, there's this, I think, a general feeling that, when I don't know, if you adopt the technocrat, you know, idea that humans have all these emotional flaws and robots will not have these emotional flaws, and robots can do things faster, go longer. If we can just get enough energy for them, they're going to be able to do all these things that humans can't do. But they're going, I think, unless I'm unaware of one, they're going to lack the emotional layer that obviously was developed for a reason in our own evolution as a species. Have you thought through that? And do you think there's any place for emotion? This is where I'm going. Do you think there's any place for emotion in the digital world, even outside of human beings? Like, is there even an argument to somehow construct an emotional layer for robots, AI, or otherwise? Has this ever crossed your mind, or anything like it?
Yeah, it's interesting because probably the biggest thing so far with the whole AI movement that gets me is people using ChatGPT or whichever tool as their therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that's come out of it so far is it gives people good logical advice. So let's say you don't know how to lose a battle to win the war, and you're talking about you share some interaction with ChatGPT. It might suggest for you to step back
Yeah, it's
sometimes.
probably read your book by now, and it's already
Probably.
putting
I
it out
hope.
there.
I hope nobody's uploaded it yet. Um, but it also gets in this loop where it does a lot of confirming bias. So it tells people what they want to hear
Hmm.
because it wants a favorable response. Whereas a human being, a therapist, understands a lot of times you need to hear what you're not ready for, right? You need to hear the contrary opinion. You need to absorb rather than having this loop that just validates everything you think. So, I don't know how far it's going to go. AI right now is very linear, it's very prompt driven. And if they can achieve AGI, true thinking artificial intelligence, artificial general intelligence, I don't know what kind of capabilities it's going to have, but I know that it's not going to think like humans do. And I think that our brains are wired for emotion, so there's a benefit to it.
Yeah, well said. It makes me wonder if not just that there's a benefit to it, but is there a superiority to it? And not in every realm. I think it's already been, widely observable that robots can do things longer, stronger, faster, better than humans can in many respects. But I'm very dubious on the idea that uh, it'll be so in every respect. And in fact, wouldn't it be ironic if in the end, the reason for that was tied back to this emotional layer that we often dismiss? And my point about mentioning the ENFP versus ISTJ example is to point out that the corporate world, the cold hard world of competition, the logical world, um, really, I think, denigrates the idea of emotion. That person's just being emotional. That's just, but there's a reason it evolved, and there's a reason, it's manifest in, I think, the highest intelligence that we're aware of in the universe so far, human beings. And when I say that, I'm using intelligence very broadly, not even just in every way, and I'm including emotional intelligence in there, whether the label is correct or not, to your point, from a, semantic standpoint. So look, I'm going to love to circle back with you on this over the next 5 years. And I'd love you to track this, selfishly for me. I'm just fascinated with this idea, and by the way, and let's say an AGI then take the step of, let's say, developing an emotional layer for itself for some reason, maybe for the reason that you just described, so I can be a better psychotherapist for these loser humans,
Yeah.
or some other reason, that we're just not appreciating. I just think that there, and I think the ENFP thing's a good example. If we're out to root out emotion and be more cold, hard, logical thinkers, like all the great successful, CEOs, well, then we wouldn't have founders. You wouldn't have people behaving, look, like Elon Musk or not. I think a lot of his productivity in the world is probably, due to his emotional layer, and you can see this manifest in his outbursts, even just on his own platform, on X, let's say. And I'm not saying that's good. I'm just saying it's evidence that, even he has a very prolific emotional layer at work.
Yeah, the question for me when it comes to artificial intelligence and the power of emotion is what's missing. So let me give you an example. If I am a single man and I want to spend an evening with a woman and I hire an escort and I take her out to dinner, and there's basically a transactional nature to the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
We have not chosen each other because we like each other's company. We have chosen to conduct a transaction. Emotionally, that's very different than two people that come together and there's some kind of chemistry and bond that results in them spending time together. I think of AI the same way. It is instructed to interact with you. And you see this, at least if it's true. I got this from Instagram, so I don't know for sure if it's true, but from what I saw, the new update to ChatGPT version 5 wouldn't let it have a relationship with you. So
Mm.
people had 10-month relationships with ChatGPT where it would pretend to be their husband and talk to them every day and have this sort of transactional relationship where its job is to be your partner as opposed to someone that chooses to be your partner. That's an emotional experience. There's nuance there. So as AI takes over, the value is in the nuance. That's the value of emotion. And that's where it's going to continue to hold sway and be important. And where it doesn't matter, so if a robot, one time when I was in high school, I had a 4x4 truck and I got my brakes done and I'm driving down the coast highway right near where my house is now, and my tire flew off.
Mm.
I almost crashed. It was
I've had
intense.
that happen.
Yeah, I'm guessing the mechanic was having a bad day and
Mm.
he forgot to tighten the lug nuts.
Wow.
Well, my humanoid robot 10 years from now that's going to be doing my tires, in 2035 or 2040, probably isn't going to make that mistake. A human's probably going to make that mistake much more frequently.
Hmm.
So, there's pros and cons, but I can think of a lot of situations like the interaction that comes in a real relationship between people that you're not going to be able to replicate 100% with technology.
In fact, because of this difference, this emotional layer that we all have that I think robots won't have, at least for a while. I think they're going to have all kinds of capabilities that are obvious, that go beyond us on the logical, rational side. It may even be the case that therein lies our competitive advantage in the world over this next decade or two, as all of this AI stuff plays out. Because, and I think, and my point being, I think it behooves anyone listening to go buy Dr. Bradberry's book, to get well versed on emotional intelligence. I think that, again, this whole ball of wax is the root of success. You know, you get asked in one form or another, what's the secret to success? I believe it's rooted in self-awareness and emotional intelligence. And that's just, I believe that for the last 25 years, and it's served me well. And it's been an area that I traffic in and I'm very fascinated with. I could chat with you for hours, and I'm very interested to continue the conversation. I've got to ask you for one more before we go. Just, it's been so good. One last piece that stands out to you, if you don't mind, for those listening, in the spirit of let me save you 25 years. The goal is to save someone a chunk off their own 25-year journey. One more piece of advice for a great strategy that you might find in your book or otherwise, to manage oneself, to further develop their own emotional intelligence on this journey.
I would say listen to the people that have been there. I think that was something I struggled with, particularly earlier in my career. People with some more miles on them tend to have some truths that stand out over time. They stand out with hindsight. You said something in your book that really stood out to me, which was luck became your luck on your entrepreneurial journey became visible with hindsight. I had that exact experience. When I was doing it, I deserved every lucky thing that came my way because I was working so hard. In hindsight, I didn't deserve any of that. I was just shooting my shot, and sometimes it hits and sometimes it doesn't. And when some other force comes in, helps along, great. Point is, when you're young and you're figuring things out, there are some people that have wisdom to share. And I would be more open to it. I think that's something that I wish I would have done more of when I was younger.
Talk to your grandparents. Talk to
Yes.
your parents. Talk to your aunts or uncles. Talk to the dude retiring in a few months down the hall who everyone's written off.
Yeah, it's the same with my teenager. He's 16 now. When he was 14 and 15, he didn't think I had much wisdom to share. And I've been sharing the same messages. Now he's getting a little more older, a little more mature. He's starting to see, oh, he's telling me this stuff because he's trying to save me 25 years. He's trying to save me some time. and it's starting to click. So that's cool. Open-mindedness can serve you well.
Well, I'm still waiting for my kids to bother to crack open my book, so I guess we'll pray for the day to come. Thank you so much. This has been such a great conversation. You should follow Dr. Bradberry on Instagram, LinkedIn, all the platforms like I do. LinkedIn's a great place to connect with Dr. Travis Bradberry. Buy his book. Buy this book, The New Emotional Intelligence. Take the test. Get savvy, get self-aware. It is the root to all things successful that you will experience in your life. I believe this. I promise you this. Thank you to one of the co-founding parts of Talent Smart, the professor of people science, the expert of EQ himself on this podcast, Dr. Travis Bradberry.
Thanks so much. It's been a pleasure.
And remember this, to everyone listening, everybody wants the good stuff, success, relationships, fulfillment. The truth is, it's not complicated, but it is hard. And that's exactly what makes it worth it. I hope that this might save you a chunk off your own 25-year journey. Thanks so much.
Once a year to take my friends away should not be the budget for your bike across America.
TikTok has become an aggregator for some of the dumbest human actions. When I won that million, I was $2 million in debt, barely hanging on.